Set in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains is Denver, Colorado. It is the home of one of the National Football League's finest teams, the Denver Broncos. In 1985, the Broncos were the defending Western Division champions, and their head coach, Dan Reeves, was the winningest coach in the history of the franchise. Together with club president Pat Bowlen and general manager John Beek, Reeves had worked diligently to create this latest Rocky Mountain masterpiece. Denver recorded its 120th consecutive sellout as the Broncos attacked 1985 with the confidence of a champion. Unfortunately, this season, the Broncos weren't a team of destiny. However, they certainly were a team of daring and drama. And for Pat Bowlen, the rest of the Bronco organization and fans, 1985 was a season of miracle makers and heartbreakers. Against the Los Angeles Rams on opening day, Denver lost 20-16. And 3 weeks later against Miami, they let an early lead slip away to the elusive Dolphins, losing 30-26. After 4 weeks, Denver had lost as many as they had won. Yet each contest clearly demonstrated that these Broncos still had a kick or two left in them. Against the Dolphins, Denver's defense registered the first sacks on Miami's Dan Marino all season, as they dropped this poised passer 3 times. Even in defeat, these Broncos never lost their poise, and wins over Atlanta and New Orleans proved that Denver could still beat the teams they were supposed to beat. But more than that, these games proved that Denver's offense was now on an explosive par with the NFL's best. The Broncos were averaging 30 points a game, results that began up front in the offensive line. Tackles Dave Studdard, number 70, Ken Lanier, Winford Hood, guards Keith Bishop, Paul Howard, Mark Cooper, and center Billy Bryan formed a punishing barrier between themselves and quarterback John Elway, allowing the Broncos offense to take wing. Denver's passing attack soared on the strength of John Elway's arm, and his mobility bought additional time and created better blocking angles for his blockers. Elway counted on the sure hands of his tight ends, Clarence Kay, number 88, and James Wright, who caught 57 passes between them. 61 times he connected with Steve Watson, number 81, who led the club in receptions for the 3rd straight season. Rookie wideout Vance Johnson, number 82, was second in receiving with 51 receptions. And with Butch Johnson and Clint Sampson, number 84, in reserve, only 5 other teams passed for more yards than the Broncos. Throughout 1985, the Broncos found many interesting ways to advance the football through the air. In Week 5, some Denver razzle-dazzle broke open a tight contest with the Houston Oilers. The Broncos pulled away to a 31-20 victory, and with a record of 3-2, the winning was just beginning in Denver. The success of the Denver Broncos defense has never been a product of one or two men's talent and brilliance. It is the sum of its many parts.
Gotta pop, y'all.
Rarely has any one professional unit featured such a collection of well-meshed talent. And in 1985, few played better defense by opportunity than these stampeding Broncos. The Broncos defense, cooked up by assistant head coach Joe Collier, is as aggressive as it is difficult for opponents to figure out. It begins with strength up front in down linemen Barney Chavis, Andre Townsend, Reuben Carter, Simon Fletcher, Greg Cragen, and Rulon Jones, number 75, who shredded double-team blocks and collected 10 quarterback sacks. Jones earned a trip to the Pro Bowl, as did Carl Mecklenburg, number 77, who was part linebacker and part defensive lineman. Starting only the last 9 games, this former 12th round draft choice posted 13 sacks, the 4th highest total in the AFC. Together with linebackers Jim Ryan, Tom Jackson, Steve Busick, Rick Dennison, and Ken Woodard, Denver clogged up the running lanes and stripped opponents of their weapons. Denver's defensive backs were just as aggressive. Dennis Smith, number 49, played strong safety, but he hit like a linebacker. Smith and the rest believed that the football was the property of the man holding it at the end of the play, not the beginning. Cornerback Mike Harden, number 31, led the team in interceptions. And free safety Steve Foley was tied for second with cornerback Louis Wright, number 20. When the football hit the ground against Denver, it was difficult to get possession back. After beating the Indianapolis Colts, Denver shook down the Seattle Seahawks in a defensive struggle that wasn't decided until overtime. Tied at 10 apiece, Seattle quarterback Dave Craig was intercepted by nickelback Daniel Hunter, number 25. It was the Broncos' 3rd interception of the day and gave kicker Rich Carlos the opportunity to win the game.
We are tied in overtime, 10-10. Carlos to attempt a field goal, that would win it. The snap, the ball is down, the kick by Carlos. It's good and the Broncos win. Denver 13, Seattle 10.
Once again, Denver's special teams had delivered when it counted. Punter Chris Norman's high, towering punts enabled hustling hitters like Randy Robbins, Tony Lilly, Darren Como, number 98 Ricky Hunley, and special teams MVP Daniel Hunter, number 25, to close down the returns before they could get started. Much like the defense, the special teams were opportunistic, something that was evident in the 8th week in Kansas City. Randy Robbins blocked 2 Chiefs punts in 1 game. The subsequent field position set up 2 Gerald Wilhite touchdown runs that followed the blocks of Gene Lang, number 33. Denver rode to a 30-10 victory, spurred on by the depth of their backfield. Athletes who were as interchangeable as they were versatile. Sammy Winder, number 23, led the club in rushing and touchdowns. And second-year runner Gene Lang was impressive in only his 2nd pro season. Reserve quarterback Gary Kubiak, number 8, and first-round choice Steve Sewell, number 30, both played well when called upon. Denver's depth often allowed them to gamble on offense, and their offense was most effective when it was most daring. After a Week 9 loss to the Chargers, head coach Dan Reeves and his staff pulled out all the stops on a frigid Monday night against the defending world champion San Francisco 49ers. John Elway threw 2 touchdown passes. One to Gene Lang, number 33, and another one to Steve Watson, number 81. Denver had embraced its opportunities. Now, with 1st and 4 at the Bronco goal line, it was San Francisco's turn to try. Quite often at the goal line, if you can stop the first play, you've got a fighting chance to stop the next 3, because you've sown some doubt.
2. They pitch to Craig. He cuts. He is knocked down short of the goal line. Broncos have held. Take over at the 1.
Throughout the evening, Denver kept 49er quarterback Joe Montana on ice. However, when San Francisco finally warmed up and took the lead with barely 3 minutes to play, John Elway responded by driving Denver 63 yards and gave kicker Rich Karlis the opportunity to win the game. Denver won it 17-16, and with a record of 7-3, they were on the road to another Western Division title. However, one breakdown during their final 6 games would turn these miracle makers into heartbreakers. Week 11 found the Broncos locked in a scoring shootout with the San Diego Chargers. Dan Fouts and John Elway traded scoring passes, and Gene Lang followed playbook-perfect blocking for another score as the game was tied at the end of regulation time. Denver's fate would be decided in overtime for the second of 4 times in 1985, and only a great effort by Dennis Smith and Louis Wright kept the Broncos alive. However, after blocking 1 field goal and then losing it because a timeout had been called, the Broncos needed one more miracle.
10:36 left in sudden death overtime. If Thomas makes it, the Chargers win. Tied in overtime at 24. Ball is down. Thomas's kick is blocked. Picked up on the run. Here comes Louis Wright. They won't catch him. To the 20. Into the 15. Score. Broncos block the field goal, run it back and win. Dennis Smith got in. The Broncos get the block. And Louis Wright is mobbed as he goes through the end zone. Let the crowd tell you the story. They start yelling, Louis, Louis, as he comes back, mobbed, back out on the field. Final, Denver 30, San Diego 24.
2 weeks later in Pittsburgh, the Broncos would be miracle makers once more. Denver's defense punished the Steelers, and Steve Wilson pulled in 2 of the Broncos' 4 interceptions that day. However, it was an interception thrown by John Elway with barely 6 minutes remaining that threatened to ruin a near-perfect day. Most quarterbacks who had just thrown the lead away would have been unnerved, but not John Elway. Stepping around the pressure and using his many skills, number 7 used only 6 plays in 3 minutes to show why he was one of the NFL's most exciting quarterbacks in 1985. Sewell's second touchdown of the day lifted Denver to a 24-23 lead. And then Mike Harden made it final. However, the fate of the 1985 Denver Broncos was sealed during two meetings against their arch rivals, the Los Angeles Raiders. The Broncos' inability to contain Marcus Allen led to a 31-28 overtime loss in the Coliseum in Week 12. Then a Week 14 snowstorm in Mile High Stadium turned into a slow-motion nightmare as Denver's fourth overtime period ended in sudden death. Denver's playoff hopes were suddenly out of their own hands, and these miracle makers were looking more like heartbreakers. In 1985, John Elway showed why he was one of the NFL's finest quarterbacks, as well as one who is going to keep getting better. Throughout the season, Elway brought havoc against opponents with his arm and his legs. Number 7 was Denver's Houdini with a rifle, who escaped often enough and shot straight enough to keep the Bronco offense moving goalward. Above all, Elway possessed that magic quality of putting points on the board from anywhere on a football field. However, Elway's greatness was often most evident on his worst days. Against the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 15, he threw 5 interceptions. But by now, Elway's teammates knew that their quarterback could steer himself and his team in the right direction, even when everything else seemed to be spinning out of control. Trailing by only 6 points at 13-7, Elway had barely a minute to play, and Bronco fans were thoroughly familiar with his penchant for saving lost causes.
Seconds to go. They'll give the ball to Winder, and he dives in, scores! Broncos lead. Denver 14, Kansas City 13 on a 59-yard drive and a 1-yard run. Bryant and Bishop with a block.
Denver's playoff hopes were still alive, but in order to keep them breathing, they would have to leave the friendly confines of Mile High Stadium and travel to the deafening roar of the Kingdome for a Friday night battle with the Seattle Seahawks. Denver quickly got into trouble. The Broncos spent the first quarter watching the Seahawks build a 17-0 lead. But those who had a feel for the heartbeat of this team knew well that the pulse of the game could change rapidly.
Come on, offense, let's get it started!
Again, against all odds, the Broncos started building a comeback. Denver's defense shut down the Seahawks in the second half. And John Elway passed for 435 yards by using unconventional targets like guard Mark Cooper, number 63, and more conventional receivers like Clint Sampson, who made unconventional catches. Finally, with a little over 2 minutes to go, the Broncos pulled even at 24. Then, during their final possession, Denver had to draw on all their determination and character to earn this amazing victory. With no guarantees, on this drive, Denver accomplished everything asked of them to make the playoffs. Yet when it was over, 4 other teams with inferior records were bound for postseason play instead of the Broncos, who finished with a record of 11-5. 24-24
tie. Kubiak will hold it. Broncos trying to get the lead for the first time in the game. Ball is down. Carlos's kick on the way. It is long enough, and it is good. The Broncos lead 27-24.
The 1985 ended short of a much-deserved playoff berth. There was pride in knowing that these miracle makers and heartbreakers had never quit. The talent and character they showed in the face of one of the NFL's toughest schedules promises even greater glories for the Denver Broncos in the years to come.